Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to read day one of my brand new devotional for couples, The Secret to Becoming Soulmates. This 52-day devotional will create conversations that will deepen your emotional intimacy and help you form a strong spiritual bond. When you put God at the center of your relationship, and that's the whole point of this book, putting God where he belongs and keeping him there at the center, you're going to be intimate. God's going to make sure of it. The two of you can't create intimacy for very long and very deeply. God can. Now, The Secret to Becoming Soulmates is available for a special pre-sale price in October. So this is the last week. You have until October 31st to get the special pre-sale price. Go to my website, davideclarkephd.com, that's Clarke with an E, and order the book. You'll also see all my other resources for marriages in crisis. Also, I want you to know that if you're in a marital crisis, that's what I do. And if you want to talk to me about your crisis, you can do that very easily. Phone advice service is something I'm doing now with couples and really mainly one spouse at a time across the country now. Many sessions a week. You can explain your situation to me, and whatever the marital crisis, after 34 years, I'll have an answer, I'll have a plan, I'll have a book to empower you and hopefully to save your marriage. Now, before I dive into day one of my new couples devotional, I'll answer a question from a podcast listener. Here's the question. My husband is a good man, but not a spiritual leader. He'll go to church with me, but that's about it. I long for a spiritual connection with him, but he's not interested. What do I do? If I've heard that question one time, I've heard it a million times from ladies, from wives in particular. Here's my answer. You have to play the long game with your husband. Any direct approach won't work. Don't beg, don't plead, don't cry, don't pressure him in any direct way to spiritually bond with you. Even a good man will resist that. It's just human nature, male nature. I'm telling you, get my new devotional. Look at this coincidence that this question comes at this time. Get my new devotional, The Secret to Becoming Soulmates, and it's perfect for your situation. The small bite-sized chunks in this book, the devotional days, will help him begin to talk on the spiritual level, low-key, little bit at a time. He'll listen to you talk about spiritual things. He'll identify his blocks to spiritual growth and spiritual bonding with you. And he'll learn just a little bit at a time how to form a spiritual bond with you. He'll end up in a spiritual bond with you because of this book over time, and he won't even know what hit him. And he'll realize, hey, this is great. So it not only is a great book for couples, it's a great book for if you're a wife with a husband who isn't a Christian, and so along the way can become a Christian through this book, just a step at a time over a period of some months. Or you're married to a man who is a Christian but not really growing spiritually and not really interested in a bond with you. It will serve both those purposes. Okay, I'm going to walk you through day one of my brand new devotional just to give you a taste of what you're going to get when you buy the book. And again, this is a book to be done together, not by yourself. Now, I'm trying to convince the blonde, the famous blonde, Sandy, Roxanne Clarke. Her middle name is Roxanne, very spicy. Ho, ho, ho. She's a spicy woman. Anyway, enough about that. But I'm trying to convince the blonde to do one of these days with me in a podcast. I think she's going to do it. That'll be a lot of fun, but she wasn't quite ready. So here's day one. This is what you'll start with your husband or your wife. Or you could be dating or engaged. Here's the big idea. Big idea of day one, your dad and your view of God. Because how you see your dad is how you see God. Okay, basics. This is the personal story that every devotional has in it. From the age of 6 or 7, I loved golf. I would spend hours in my front yard and the front yard of our next door neighbors, the Tosian family, because I needed the space, hitting plastic golf balls with my trusty sawed-off 7-iron. I did that for hours at a time and loved. I had little holes set up. It was great fun. When I was in my early teens, I started to play golf at actual golf courses. I asked my dad to take me golfing, and he did a number of times. This is significant because my dad had no experience playing golf. He was an excellent tennis player, but almost certainly the worst golfer who ever lived. And I'm telling you, I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. Dad had only 2 shots in his repertoire. A 20-yard roller on the ground or a wild slice 40 yards out of bounds. That was it, no in between. He was a good putter, but when he reached the green, his score was already 10 or higher, so it really didn't matter what he did on the green. One day, We were playing golf and about to tee off on a hole. Just before we hit our tee shots, and I think it was like hole number 10. We played the front 9 and we were teeing off on number 10. So it's by the clubhouse. Okay, we're just about to tee off, and just before we hit the shots, the course marshal drives up to the tee in his golf cart and stops. Nobody wants that. Every golfer knows it's harder to hit a decent drive when someone is watching. I teed off and produced a nice drive down the middle of the fairway. I was a decent golfer. I'd been playing for a while. My dad steps up to the tee and proved that God is a God of miracles for the first time and only time in his life. He drilled his tee shot straight and far down the fairway. What a shock. As we drove off in the tee in our cart, we both laughed out loud. I asked Dad, where did that drive come from? He replied, Dave, God hit that drive. And it must have been the case. That's just one moment from my life with Dad, but it was classic. Now, my golf story describes my dad's personality. Kind, gracious, loving. He's always been that way. He played golf only because I wanted to play golf. He hated golf. He didn't play golf, but I wanted to play golf. That was enough for Dad. So because of my dad, I've always seen God as kind, gracious, and loving. You see, there's a direct parallel, not partial, direct parallel between how you see your father and his personality and how you see God and his personality. I mean, you can read in the Bible about God, of course, and you should, but your view of your God transfers directly to God. So your dad's personality, especially as you grew up, has a huge impact on how you view God. Now, next section is the Bible. I always have a verse of the Bible or a passage in each day devotional. 1 Thessalonians 5:15 is my choice for the first day. And that says, make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always try to be kind to each other and to everyone else. You know, I wish that described me. Frankly, it doesn't, not most of the time. This describes my dad, a gracious, loving, kind person. Now, the next section is breakthrough, and here's really the guts of the book. Every devotional day has a section called breakthrough, and this is where you answer questions and interact together. This is where the book will really hit home and develop the spiritual bond between the two of you. Okay, first question here in breakthrough for the two of you is, and of course you'll answer it one at a time. Describe your dad's personality, particularly what kind of person he was during your childhood, 0 to 18 years, because that's when you're really formed as a person. Does a single word occur to you at first? Well, here's my answer to that question. You already kind of have a feel for what I'm going to say. I'm going to say kind. My dad's a kind person. He's always been kind. He's gracious. He's loving too. My dad didn't say a bad word about anyone as I grew up. If you can imagine, about anybody. He was an honest person. He was truthful, but he didn't. He was just very sweet and kind. My mother, on the other hand, didn't mind criticizing other people. I mean, not in a mean way, but she was very outspoken. Dad was so kind. He would always say, well, that person cut me off in traffic. I'm not going to horn that person because you know what? They probably are on the way to the hospital. Maybe the wife is pregnant. Maybe they have a problem physically. I'm thinking, and my mom is thinking, who cares? He cut you off. Hit the horn. Okay, that's just a different personality. That's a kind person who always thinks about the other person and what they might be going through. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. I don't care what their problem is. They cut me off. I guess I have to work on that. But that's my dad. Okay, second question here. Name one of Dad's positive traits and one of his negative traits. Because, okay, so every dad, as wonderful as my dad is, has negative traits too. So name one of Dad's positive traits and one of his negative traits. Tell a brief story illustrating each of these traits. Again, there's more conversation here. So let me go through this. Okay, I'd say a positive trait of my dad, and this fits with the kindness, is love and care for other people. He would come home, he's been a counselor for years just like me, and so as I grew up, Dad was counseling people, couples, individuals, and so we'd come home and just tell stories without identifying features, of course, names or anything, but he'd tell stories at the dinner table about the people he was trying to help. And again, he was kind-hearted, he was giving them instructions, he was talking about their issues and what they were struggling with. And so he was in the trenches with people, and I really felt like he loved and cared for other people. Now that's really, even though I'm kind of more of a brash person, outspoken like my mother, I don't really have a filter in case you have noticed in these podcasts and on my videos. But I love people. That's why I do what I do. I care for people. And that's one of my dad's most positive traits. And it felt like growing up, that's what I want to do. I love people too. I'm fascinated by them. So that's a positive trait. Now, I'd say a negative trait is that my dad's a workaholic. He was a very hardworking man growing up. I'm doing the same things my dad did as I grew up and in his career. Of course, he counseled people many hours a week. He created seminars and would fly to various countries countries in the world. I mean, various cities in the country, the U.S., and would give marriage seminars and parenting seminars. He wrote books. I'm doing the same things. He did some media things. Okay, he got too busy. I worked with my dad for 5 years when I got my PhD in 1986, and so I came to Tampa, Florida, and worked with my dad. And I had a great 5 years. He taught me so many things, but I saw that workaholism. Because just about every night, it'd be about 5 o'clock, 5:15, we're kind of wrapping up. My last client's leaving, his last client's leaving, and he would get tied up, in doing other projects. I'd still be there. And my mother would call. We had a message machine. You could hear it. At that point, we would raise the volume so you could hear the message. And she'd say, Bill, my dad's name is Bill. Bill, it's 5:30. It's 5:30. You were supposed to be home at 5:30. The meal's on the table. Why can't you come home? And my dad would say, oh, yeah, sorry, I got wrapped up. And so he'd go home at that point, only 2 minutes down the road. And my home was like 3 minutes down the road. But I would say the negative trait, workaholism. And frankly, I'm not blaming anybody. I love my dad, but that's something that I have struggled with my whole career. I'm a workaholic. I'm still a workaholic. I got to really watch my schedule. I love to do my work. Love to prepare speeches, love to do these podcasts, love to write books, the videos, a lot of things going on. And so I can get carried away. So that would be one of my dad's negative traits that is also transferred to me. Okay, number 3 gets a little deeper in the third question in the breakthrough section here. Talk about how your dad's personality has shaped your view of God. Okay, now we talk about him and now we zero in. And this lady that had the podcast question, if you can imagine your husband answering these questions, even if he doesn't get into depth, it's a beginning. It's a start of talking about things that he would never talk about if you asked him. But if he's reading a book along with you, and these are my questions, chances are he'll talk. Okay, in my case, in terms of my dad's personality shaping my view of God, I see God as kind, loving, gracious, and interested in me. Because that's how I see my dad. Now, if your dad was harsh, critical, verbally abusive, that's how you see God. Very likely going to have to work through that because that's a direct transfer to how you'll see God. If you were never good enough for your dad, if your dad was strict, if he was demanding, if he had high expectations and you couldn't quite reach them, again, that's how you're going to see God. We see God as a male figure in our life, and so it transfers. If your dad was absent, not involved, didn't care about you, again, that's going to be an issue with you and God. Going to have to work that through. You can do it. But see, that would be a block for many men, potentially, their view of God in terms of spiritual growth and bonding with you. So, now the same thing, of course, is true in the lady's life. I'm talking about men here because of the podcast question, but it could easily be the woman. What was your dad like? Kind, gracious, involved, loving, or harsh, critical, non-involved, absent? It just depends. Was there abuse? For those of you abused by your father, God forbid sexually, but if that happened, that's going to transfer also to your view of God and not being able to trust and really come close to him potentially until you work through the abuse. Or neglect, or just not really around, or not caring for you. It just doesn't make any difference what the issues are, but they're going to transfer to your view of God. So this begins the process of talking about your view of God. The final section in day 1, my day 1 devotional, is a brief prayer. I call it Bring It to God. It's just a brief prayer. Either one of you can pray. And again, if either one of you really has trouble praying out loud, there's no problem with that. The partner who wants to pray out loud can simply pray this very brief prayer out loud, holding hands if your spouse will hold your hand, and that'll be it. Over time, and I've seen this happen thousands of times, over time, as you get into the process of spiritual bonding, the partner who doesn't want to pray out loud will be able to do so. Now, if both of you are thinking, boy, I don't really want to pray out loud, no problem. You just both kind of pray this prayer silently as you hold hands. It doesn't make any difference. But here's the prayer I have written down. Dear God, help me to understand that how I see my father is how I see you. Help me to not transfer my dad's negative personality traits and actions to you. and give me the ability to see and experience you only for who you are as recorded in the Bible. See, that's the goal all of us have. We want to see God and experience him for who he is in the Bible. Well, your view of Dad can get in the way. And so, that is day one of my devotional, The Secret to Becoming Soulmates, available on my website, davideclarkephd.com, Clarke with an E. For this week only now. This is coming out just before the pre-sale's over, but November 1st, beginning November 1st, you'll have to pay $20 for this book. Well, you're getting a special price, so I'd go for it now. Up to you. Now, one last thing, and this is important, if you'll help us with this. If you're enjoying these podcasts, and now we're adding the video component to them, because people were clamoring to see Dr. Clarke in person, well, for obvious reasons. I'm kidding. Look, we've added it. If you're enjoying these podcasts, give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you can share these podcasts with others, that'd be great. These steps will help us continue to grow our audience and save more marriages. And if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, and some of you are, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. This will help grow our audience. So until next time, David E. Clarke, PhD,